It's my honor to call to order the Central Virginia Transportation Finance Committee meeting. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and agree. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. I see we have a quorum. We will need to certify that in 1 minute. All right, we are waiting for our clerk so we can do our certification and get going. We got a very busy agenda, so we will be rolling through and doing some great work this morning. Okay, Mr. Parsons, are you able to call the roll for us?
Yes, sir, I can do that. Chesterfield County, Mr. Carroll.
I'm here.
Hanover County, Mr. Davis.
Present.
Raccoon County, Mr. Schmidt.
Yes, not Mr. Nelson, Mr. Schmidt today. Thank you for being here. Good to see you all.
Peachtree County, Mr. Spoonhour.
Here.
New Kent, Mr. Moyer.
Here.
And City Richmond, Mayor Stoney.
Present.
Commonwealth Transportation Board, Mr. Davis.
Here.
I can certify we do have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Great job. That's what I make the big ones. All right, Mr. Parsons, do we have anybody that's requesting remote participation?
No, sir, we don't.
Okay. Folks, regarding considerations of amendments to the agenda, I'd like to move item 1, which is a discussion of the working capital reserve strategy, down past our action items, which would be moving number 1 to number 4. Any objections? So, okay. We need to move on, or can we just move it there?
As long as there's no objection.
Okay, no objection, great. All right, so then we will be now moving into.
On that side. Sorry? You mixed them up. You put the Schmidt over there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, folks, we are moving into the approval of the September 11th meeting minutes, which you can be found on page 4 of your packet. Hopefully you've had a chance to review them. Do I have any requests to amend or a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Thank you. I have a motion second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please state by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, great. Moving right along to our open public comment period. This is a chance for folks to address the Finance Committee about issues pertaining to CVTA and finance. Mr. Parsons, do we have anybody online or any emails that we received?
No, sir.
Does anyone in the room wish to address the committee? All right, seeing none, I will close the public comment period. All right, for the sake of time, I will forego my report. Just again, thanks everybody for being here this morning, and got a lot to go through, a lot of great work to do. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Parsons for the Executive Director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just 2 quick items for everyone's information. One, Mr. Davis and I are starting to schedule meetings with councils and boards over the next 6 to 8 months. We are starting to line up for the remainder of this calendar year, and looks like we have some dates already set for November and December. But we're looking forward to working with your staff to once schedules are set for calendar year 25, we'll start to slot those in and look forward to meeting with you all individually at your jurisdictional meetings and share the latest updates from CVTA. That was a really good experience in the last few years, so we're excited to keep that process moving. Then the second item is that I expect by the end of October, early November, we will have a brand new CVTA website rolling out and going live. I'm really excited about this, and I think it's gonna help to advance a lot of the things that this committee, as well as the full authority, has raised in terms of better engaging the public and providing information in a timely manner that's easily accessible and really tells the story of what CVTA is and what we hope to do for the region. So I'll be bringing back updates, hopefully at your next meeting with something to actually show on the screen. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parsons. Any questions for Mr. Parsons? All right, moving into the CVTA activities report. Mr. Parsons, do you have the financial activities and investment reports?
I do. This is page 9 in the agenda packet. We are now looking at May accruals as of August 31st. That's our latest report for the financial reporting, and that will be on page 9. Lifetime to date, a total of $776.6 million in taxes received through the sales and use tax and local fuels tax that has been distributed as received in our three main ways. 35% stays regional for the CVTA to direct. That's about $271 million. 116 lifetime to date, 116.2 has gone to GRTC. And then lifetime to date, we're looking at local distributions, which is half of all the revenues collected, in the amount of $387.3 million out to localities to use for all transportation purposes as identified by the jurisdiction. Mr. Chair, if there's no other questions on that, the page 10 as the August 2024 investment report. You can see that we are continuing to operate very well in regards to investment earnings for the cumulative interest earnings. So this will be FY 2025. We are up to 1.7 million in interest earnings, and that is just for July and August of FY 25. So performing very, very well. As you know, we had the conversation last month about what to do with those interest earnings, and there's more information on that. But we're already looking forward to continuing that effort over the next fiscal year. So I'd be happy to take any questions. As you can see, page 10 and 11 are the investment report, and it mirrors the format that you're familiar with.
Great. Are there any questions for our executive director? Okay, seeing none, we will move into our TAC activities report. Ms. Smith?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Last week, the Fall Line Trail Working Group met in continued discussion of the long-term management of the Fall Line Trail. We're still gathering resources or information that can serve as a reference for discussions between VDOT jurisdictions and any entities that might be interested in the long-term management of the trail. We hope to wrap this up in November. Funding for trail maintenance continues to be a concern, particularly for sections of the trail that will be maintained by cities. CVTA staff will be developing potential strategies for discussion by the PAC on that could inform funding decisions at the state level. Updates to the status of the trail include that VDOT advertised the design build section for the design build contract for the southern section on Monday. So keep your fingers crossed that we get some good bids. During our TAC meeting, we continued discussion of the regional project selection allocation framework document. And during the discussion of the deallocation policy, there were scenarios brought up that revealed that we probably need to go back to the framework and consider how leveraging funds might be used for advancing design of projects. So considering the timing of the request to use the funding that way, the level of design that could be completed, and limiting the amount of money that is allocated towards PE only efforts so that we don't end up with a bunch of plans on the shelf that can't be delivered to the public. So that'll be up for discussion still. CVTA staff presented a potential additional measure for scoring transit projects for consideration in the framework document. We'll still talk about that a little bit more. And then TAC members were requested to update the anticipated cash flow spend down plans for CVTA regional projects. And I believe those updates are due November 23rd. That's all I have. Do you have any questions?
Anything from Ms. Smith? All right, thank you for all you guys do. All right, moving on to other business, we will go with our item number 2, which is gonna be our first item for discussion, is our regional funding deallocation policy. Looks like Mr. Parsons.
Yes, sir, thank you very much. This is actually a handout, if everybody was able to pick that up out on the table. The title is Deallocation of Regional Funding by the Central Virginia Transportation Authority. This is something that, I'll call it a loose end. The framework that the CVTA had adopted a few years ago, that Ms. Smith was just referencing, has a section in it which talks about, I think best use of funds is essentially the discussion item. In the event that there are leveraged funds, which means that projects aren't fully funded, if there are leveraged funds that aren't being able to be applied, the goal of the authority is to keep the funding available for the biggest and highest impact projects. So if there are leveraged funds that aren't able to be applied for some reason, whether, a smart scale application was not successful over multiple attempts, or if other funding opportunities did not materialize for some reason, there is a potential for deallocation of funds from a committed project to be able to put back into the balance entry and used for something else, another big regional need, as we know, there's lots. So what Mr. Gregory and I did, along with TAC, was to start to work up a policy which would address the potential for deallocation. And what you have in front of you is a cleaned up version of that draft policy, which has been reviewed and forwarded for recommendation by the TAC. So what this does is it is a reference point from that decision-making framework to talk about deallocation and what that means for our regional projects. It essentially talks about a timeframe of 4 years for leveraged committed projects to achieve full funding. If within that 4-year period, full funding is not achieved, there are opportunities to one, change the funding request, change the leveraged amount for these projects in particular, of which the time frame would start over again. It also talks about a process for review of a potential deallocation by a multi-pronged checks and balances. Essentially, the technical advisory committee would start with a review of potential deallocation. The TAC would then advise the finance committee on the recommended action. Ultimately, the finance committee would provide a recommendation to the authority for consideration. Once that happens, though, that doesn't mean that a project will have funding deallocated. That just means that the authority would notify the locality that this project is being considered and provide an opportunity for the locality to come back and talk to the project, provide explanation of where the standing is and maybe efforts that are being taken to achieve the full funding. After that point, it again goes back to Finance Committee for consideration and another recommendation to the CVTA for ultimate action. Essentially, what we're trying to do here is provide as much opportunity as possible for locality projects that are awarded regional leveraging funds to make the projects happen. We don't ever want to be able to talk about taking funds away from a prioritized project that has received positive action from the full authority. But in the event that it does happen, priorities do change from time to time. This is a a methodology for the CVTA to consider in the event that action does have to happen. So, following the TAC review and a lot of hard work by a working group of the TAC, this is now presented for action by the authority. And what we're asking today is for the Finance Committee to recommend the full authority approve the regional funding deallocation policy.
Well then,
Mr. Chairman.
Steve.
Thank you, sir. I just want to draw attention to first sentence in paragraph 3, particularly with CTV being here and our esteemed colleagues who are gonna maybe have to deal with this in the future. It's if the project sponsor is unable to fully fund a project within 4 years of having regional CVTA funds allocated, the project will be deemed eligible for deallocated. It's not an automatic, it's not that you put on the list and comes up. It's just eligible for that, and then a determination would be made at that time with full authority approval. And I know it clearly states that, but I think it's just important to have that on the record.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Yes, sir.
Any other comments for Ms. Parsons or questions? I had a couple, if you can indulge me. So I think everything is very clear and very well laid out. The only question I have is with the potential for additional funds. So let's say my project comes through, it's a leveraging project for smart scale. It doesn't get the smart scale funding. Let's say we were given $1 million. And then 2 years, the next round, we go to apply again. It's my understanding it's then adjusted for inflation, the project cost. However, is it to come back to the CVTA to make up those funds if that's what the locality is asking, or so does it have to go through the whole process again?
Conceivably, if I may, you could, a locality could come back to the CVTA and request additional funding to make the project more appealing to other funding agencies, whether that's VDOT, or whether that's federal highways, or whatever, the smart scale process, whatever it is. If you want to enhance the funding, request that the CVTA enhance its contribution to the project, enhance its funding of the project to make it more attractive to other agencies, then that could happen during that process. If a local agency came to the CVTA and said, we're going to apply for additional funding from this other agency to make this project more attractive to the other funding agencies that may be involved or may be interested or participating in the project, then that's a possibility too. All those things could happen within this review process, within this 4-year period.
And just to clarify, that scenario where the jurisdiction is coming back to the CVTA for the funds, for additional project funds, you said they go through that process. Is it a sub-process of our normal allocations?
Right.
That's a process that actually some projects have already gone through.
Yeah, it exists already. So
We've
they
done
could
it already,
say,
Mr. Chair.
they could say, for instance, we wanna request additional funding. They would go through that process, and basically the deallocation process would be stayed essentially to allow that to occur. And then once that occurred, if additional funding was allocated for a project, then they may say, well, we're not gonna go forward with the deallocation at this time. We're gonna allow it another bite at the apple, as it were, for that process to go through again another round. So every time that process can be restarted, or that timeline can be restarted, so.
So when you ask for more money, it resets the clock.
That's right. That's right. And so, the process is, you'll notice that the process is very process intensive.
The process is going process.
It's a lot of process, because you want this kind of decision to be reviewed at as many levels as possible, because of course, the agency doesn't want to take this action. You want the projects to move forward. You want to give them every opportunity. So but everybody has to recognize that at some point, if a project needs something else or is just not gonna be viable, then you need to take those monies and put them elsewhere, right? So, but we want that to get every bit of attention that it deserves, that kind of decision. So that's why this process goes through the TAC, it goes through the finance committee, there's an opportunity for the locality to respond and provide additional information. It's a 4-year long window, it could be longer, so it's pretty,
So Mr. Gregory,
Friendly.
what would be stopping me or a locality from just continuing to ask for more funds in perpetuity and just keep extending that date?
you could do
Chair,
it.
the simplest answer is this, is that any project that comes back forward has to go through the allocation process again. Our first regional transportation package that we did went through Smart Scale. And then we saw how those projects scored. Some of those projects were off by just a little more money, and they would have probably got fully funded. So in the second round, actually it would have been our third round of allocation, because our first round was fall line, second round was regional, third line of allocation, some of those projects were resubmitted for additional funds. How it stops is when it comes before this full body, if it comes before the finance committee, for example, in the next round, and say, look, we gave you money in the first round, we gave you more money in the second round, it didn't score, now you're asking for more, we can go, it ain't gonna make a difference, so no, we're not gonna approve your project.
But based on the mayor's question, that money still gets held up for another 4 years.
It
I've restarted this. I've restarted the
It
process.
resets, but it doesn't mean that this body doesn't have the authority to go, no, we do. So we don't want
So
to, we want to actually look, why have it, the allocation is what you're gonna ask, why have it in the first place? It's so that it brings a project forward, so you can actually look at it and say, yes or no, is this gonna work?
No, I understand, it just seems like even if the goal is to ensure that projects that we want moving forward, that monies can go to other projects that are being used, the resetting of that 4 years, how does that not bind us into holding that money?
It doesn't bind the authority, because as Mr. Carroll stated, the authority ultimately can say, the locality could request additional funds to make the project more attractive, but the authority ultimately could say, no, we're not gonna allocate more money, we're not gonna throw good money after bad, as it were, at this project for another round. We're going to say no, and we're gonna allow the deallocation process to continue so that conversation can be had, and then what funds remain on the project can then be deallocated or not.
And we haven't, Mr. Chair, we haven't had to do that yet.
No, I
We've been working very diligently with the entire region to try and make sure we fund everybody's project, but it may come to that at one point.
Sure.
And the truth of the matter is, even if, for example, we bring another whole package forward, someone could make a motion to remove one from the package to be considered separately. And that would be the procedural way to go about doing it, and say, yeah, I know we have this whole package, however, someone makes a motion and say, I'm gonna pull this XYZ project for a separate consideration.
Sure.
And if they get a second and a concurrence, then that's how you would cut one off.
Great, then my last
Mr.
question.
Chair, just for clarification, to your point, does that mean, Mr. Gregory, that if the request for more funding was asked and the organization, the body denied that would begin that's the end of the extension process, is that?
Well,
Could you ask, say no,
Well, like,
ask, say no, it just goes on forever, so what's the point?
practically speaking, that would be the end. But the deallocation process, which is a separate sort of parallel process, would continue
Yeah.
to allow the deallocation, the ultimate deallocation decision to occur one way or the other. So what you're describing is the locality asked for additional money to put on project X. There's already money on project X.
Correct.
Right? But they're asking for additional money. CVTA says, no, we're not gonna give additional money towards project X. That's under consideration for deallocation, then the deallocation decision moves
Sure.
forward, and body says, no more money for, we're
So
gonna
the
take away
chair's
that money.
question is, and the clarity piece there is, the mayor asked the question correctly, if you ask and you get reallocated, well, then the clock starts.
Well,
I think the clarity
I
is
think
if you
the big-
ask and you don't get it, the
Right, well-
clock does not restart.
And again, I didn't read the clarifying, in what's in front of us, the clarifying is if the adjusted leveraging amount is approved. So so the request has to be approved, then it restarts.
Yeah, if it's not,
It's not.
That's,
Yeah,
that-
so you could ask for additional money and get a little bit more.
Sure.
And then the next year ask for a little bit more.
Yeah.
And that That would.
And that allows you the 4 years to go complete your project again. That's exactly right. Great, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Parsons, do we know if we have if this goes through, do we know if there are processes that would be targeted for deallocation?
No, we do not yet.
We do not know, or we don't have any?
We don't have any.
That's good.
We have not moved, following the next round of Smart Scale. So the next decision of Smart Scale, we will have a better indication of projects that are eligible. But at this point, we have no projects that are eligible.
Okay,
And
great.
Mr. Chair, if I
Sir.
may, one additional comment. This is just a policy, just like all your other financial policies. This policy, as it moves forward and is put into place and put into practice, if you have projects that are subjected to this policy, and it doesn't work for whatever reason, or you don't like the way it works, the body can always fine tune the policy, make changes to the policy. This is not written in stone or anything, so you can always change it. But this, we think, at this time, would satisfy this, we would answer these questions for now.
Thank you, Mr. Curry. Any other discussion points, or do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. So move for approval, to recommend to the full board. And a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none.
Mr. Chair, I thought this was only a discussion item today. I didn't know it was
This
up
is
for
a
vote.
motion to recommend to the full authority
Okay.
approval of the policy.
Okay,
Thanks for keeping me honest.
it's all good.
All right, any other discussion? Points of order? Ms. Scott, would you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Carroll?
Aye.
Mr. Schmidt?
Aye.
Chair Spoonhour?
Aye.
Mr. Moyer?
Aye.
Mayor Stoney?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Next on our agenda and other business, we will move to what was item 3, the CVT audit report. Mr. Parsons, do you want to introduce our guests?
Yes, thank you very much. Welcome to Mr. Mike Garber, who's here from Kidney Bears, to walk us through the results of the audit. We've had, on the staff side, we've had a great relationship with Mike and his team over the last few years, and this is always as painless as possible, and we appreciate their work on preparing this information for us. In the agenda packet, starting on page 12, are a few different items that I think Mike will highlight in his report. But at this point, I'll turn it over to Mike to
Sure.
share the results.
I wish I had page 12 in front of me to make sure I covered it, but that's okay. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, thank you for just giving me a few moments of your time. It sounds like you do have a full agenda. I'm gonna get you back on track if you're not, because I'm usually pretty quick with these. But we did finish the audit. I'm glad Mr. Parsons thinks it was painless. Maybe I need to do a better job of poking and prodding next year and see what we can uncover. But it did go well. When, you've kind of got people from all the different localities working together on this thing. We've got people in Chesterfield and Richmond. And that team works really well, so scattered apart. They really do a nice job with the controls and processes, answering our questions and inquiries. So kudos to your team that you've put together to help us get to this point. Thank you. So just a couple items, and I should have grabbed that as well on my way in. Just a couple items to note, and I know you just listening to your reports and your financial reports. So again, I'll start with what you want to hear. You got a clean opinion. It's an unmodified opinion, so that's the one you're looking for. So let me start there. Also in the back of the report, there's an opinion on internal controls and compliance. That report also, it has no findings as well, so just wanted to point out that everything there, we had nothing to report. Looking at the finances themselves, the local distribution fund, the GRTC fund, everything came in that we saw, everything was distributed like it should have been. So everyone received their funds timely and appropriately. The regional revenue fund, as you're well aware, continues to grow. It increased around $84 million last year, which that's kind of the goal. I know we've got projects on the horizon, but we want those funds coming in and building so we can look at these funds and projects that we want to have. We did add, and I'm not going to ask you to turn to it, we did add one table to the financials. It's found on page 21, but it's just a schedule by locality of how much funding you've received in the regional fund as well as the local distribution fund. Just something now we've gotten a little bit bigger and we have some projects going on. we thought it was important to start including the schedule. It just shows where some of our funds are going, which localities have projects, which I know you're well aware of, but just wanted to kind of put that into the financial statements themselves. So there's a new table there. Other than that, there's really nothing new or unusual in the financial statements. Did not have to adopt any new GASB pronouncements, which is always a blessing, and not have to do any of that type of thing. And Mr. Parsons gave me our management letter, and for you all, really, it's mostly what new pronouncements are upcoming that we will have to adopt into the future. And then there was a new requirement for the Virginia Security for Public Deposit Act this past year, that all localities, everybody, every authority, board, commission, county, city had to adopt. We have found out that not only did none of our clients know about this new policy that came from Richmond, we did not know about it either. It was not communicated to the auditors or to the auditees that this requirement was out there, so no one did it. And so we have a comment in the letter for you to start doing, and it's not you, because it's your staff who control the funds at the wherever our cash is sitting at Chesterfield, originally because Chesterfield holds the funds. So it's really up to Chesterfield to do this requirement. We decided as a firm and as a whole that it's kind of hard for me to write anyone up for a compliance finding when I didn't know about it either. So I didn't, and we'll have this done, and next year, then we won't have a compliance finding in our financial statements. So just a brief one. I've presented to some other regional groups like this that have a lot of representation from their counties and cities. A lot of them took this back to their directors of finance and their treasurers and said, hey, did we do this? And they didn't know about it either. So it's a very, and it's not a huge step. It's not a big compliance issue, something new that just to certify the amount of cash that we have in the bank, which the banks are already doing. So with that, I don't have anything else prepared to go over today, but I am happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Garber. Any questions? All right, well, thank you so much, very much appreciated. Board, I will need a motion to recommend approval of the audit report to the full commission.
So moved.
So moved. Second, Mr. Carroll.
I'm moving first.
Oh, second.
Oh, you did? Okay, I'm seconding it. I'm okay with it.
All right,
Okay, you're on your own little world over there, it's okay.
any further discussion? All right, Ms. Scott, can you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Carroll.
Aye.
Mr. Schmidt.
Aye.
Chair Spoonhour.
Aye.
Mr. Moyer.
Aye.
Mayor Stoney.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, motion carries. All right, now we will move on to the working capital reserve strategy, a discussion item, be led by Mr. Parsons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is another handout, a single-page handout titled Draft Working Capital Reserve Funding Strategy. This is something that is a result, well, it was an ongoing discussion, but it is a direct result of our action at the Finance Committee last month when we discussed possible uses for the interest earnings from our regional funds. And I believe it was Mr. Moyer's motion that split those interest earnings for FY '24 three ways. First was to set aside $1.5 million to the implementation of the wayfinding plan for the Fall Line Trail. And then the remaining portion of the interest earnings was to be split evenly between project uses and deposit into the working capital reserve. If you recall, the working capital reserve is something that is in our financial policies and procedures. It is essentially a fund that is set aside equal to at least 3 months of the budgeted annual regional CVTA funds. So at the point of the action of the authority at its last meeting, there was no funding set aside for the working capital reserve. So this action, this past immediate action, put a sizable chunk, just over $5 million, into the working capital reserve. But that still had an outstanding balance that needs to be addressed. And What we have done is work with Christy Choi from PFM, Mr. Gregory and I, as well as our fiscal agent from Chesterfield, discussed an approach that Christy developed. And I've asked her to join us today, Mr. Chair, to kind of walk us through what that process is for addressing the balance of the working capital reserve and how we're going to make that whole.
Thank you. Any questions, or do you want to?
Sure,
Please.
sure, I'd be happy to.
Thanks.
So the bullets on the one pager describes the strategy that we thought was appropriate. And so the remaining balance, as Chet mentioned, the current requirement for the working capital reserve is around 18 million. With the authority action in September, we have now seeded about 5 million. So there still remain a hole of about 13 million that we need to fund up to the requirement. One thing I would just note is that this requirement is a 3-month of a budgeted regional CVTA funds. So as the budgeted amount change in fiscal year 2025, we will have a moving target in terms of the reserve requirement, but the fluctuation would likely be minimal. So we think that between now and until the reserve is fully funded, the authority may consider using 100% of the investment earnings from the CVTA regional funds to go towards the working capital reserve. The earnings obviously will fluctuate based on market conditions, but we're expecting that this strategy is still gonna take more than a year to fully accomplish us to get to the goal. And the authority adopted this policy back in March of 2024. So in about a little shy of 2 years, I think we'll be at a point at which we would have fully funded this reserve requirement. So that is our recommendation, is for you to consider using all of the investment earnings towards funding of this reserve until it is fully funded.
Thank you. Members, any questions, comments, thoughts?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is, obviously, this is something we'll need to look at on a year-to-year basis, and I think this will accomplish the goal what we're looking for. But in the end, we may, end up, depending on whether we lose money, having to allocate some funds in a separate way, but I think this is a great start.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Parsons?
couple notes. I think that it's worthwhile to note that following what we've estimated, essentially 15 to 16 months, those interest earnings would then be available again once we're fully up on the balance of the working capital reserve. So this is a short term in the life of the CVTA action. And I think the other thing to note is roughly the same time, maybe a month or two apart, of when we would expect those interest earnings to top off the working capital reserve, will be another opportunity for round 4 of our regional funding allocations that spring of 26. So that would be another way to address the balance of the working capital reserve. I think the preference is to use the interest earnings because we would like for round 4 to go towards projects. But that is some essential, basically, insurance that we can top this off
Great.
in due time.
Other comments?
Just for anybody who may watch this in the future, it's, understand that although this money is allocated for this, it still remains in the investment pool to continue to hopefully earn even more dollars towards this. So it's not like we're pulling it out and setting it aside. It's actually going to continue the work to create additional funding to get us fully funded in this area.
Mr. Carroll?
If I may note one item, we did have a conversation with the team at Chesterfield and the treasurer's office to talk through this strategy the other day. And one thing that we collectively discussed was, while it will remain in the pool, as you mentioned, that we would like to show and start tracking this reserve separately on a separate general ledger, so that we can at any given point in time look and see how much money we have in that particular pot. We intend to start tracking this separately from the overall pool of regional funds.
Anything else? The only thing I would say is, I would ask, we just had the audit report, and if I have any understanding of how audits work, they look at what policies we put in place and make sure that we are compliant to our own policy. Have we, or can we run this by PB mayors to ensure that this strategy does meet what we said we were gonna do in March, and that going through this would result in a positive audit finding?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we can have that discussion. I'll
Fatty left.
I will, I will
Left this
talk to
up
Mr.
on number
Gregory.
one.
All right, you're right. Great, thank you, Mr. Preston, we can talk about. All right, so I just need to get a motion to, actually, this is just a discussion item, so we will not be bringing this up to the
It's a-
floor.
It's a discussion item, Mr. Chair. However, if you all want to give this a blessing, as it were, you could do that and recommend to the full authority that we develop a full-blown policy. These are just bullet points right now, but I think we probably ought to hone this a little bit more into a real policy. If you all direct staff to do that, we'll do it.
Mr. Chair, I think you brought up a good point. We need to check with PB Mars first. And then get some opinion from them, and then if they say good to go, then we send it forward.
Okay. So,
I think it's so-
as I understand it, staff will check with PB mayors to make sure it's compliant and then come back with a more fine-tuned policy to enact this.
Yep, okay, great. Just one comment. This was brought up just 2 months ago when we had the conversation around the initial funds. We asked Mr. Parsons to look at putting a policy in place. Seeing the speed over the last 5 years of how government works, I did not think we would have something this quickly. So Mr. Parsons, great job to you and your team.
Thank you.
Yes. All right, now we are moving on we're back on track now, the overview of our financial reporting.
Yes, thank you very much.
Let's see, other handout.
It's a handout, and I believe we actually have it in the agenda packet as well. I'm sorry for the duplication of efforts. Sid, can you put it on the screen also? So, Mr. Spoonhour asked that provide a little bit more detail on the process and the reporting. As you know, every month you see the green single page of the financial report, and we talk about the investment activities that have taken place. There's a lot of background information that we receive that goes into developing all of that, and we appreciate the work on behalf of our fiscal agents to make the information as seamless as possible for the authority to review. But I wanted to just take a few minutes and talk about the reporting that we do get from multiple sources that are checked off on each other to make sure that the taxes that are collected are coming to the authority and ultimately to the localities in as smoothly and efficient manner as possible. So, just walking through the screen here, so the tax reporting that we do get, we essentially get reports from 3 different sources: the DMV, the Department of Taxation, and then the state cardinal system, which is essentially a reporting tool, a big database. So the DMV reports on wholesale fuels taxes collected. The Department of Taxation reports on sales and use as well as fuels. And then Cardinal talks about the tax revenues as a whole and is essentially used as a safety check for distribution of those revenues ultimately to the Central Virginia Transportation Fund. Next slide. So just a sample of the reporting that we get. So this was July of 2024, first month of fiscal year 25. So we got reports from the DMV that the wholesale fuels collected were 4.91 million. The Department of Taxation reported a $4.87 million which is the 4.91 that DMV saw minus audit fees. So a little bit more detail from the tax department. And then sales and use total with fuels is 14.22 million. Cardinal report also reported that total current for the month was 19.09 million. And the payment to CVTA was in that amount. So the Central Virginia Transportation Fund essentially is the recipient, which is legislated in the code as the account essentially for the authority to receive all those tax revenues. Next page. Our monthly reporting from the fund itself shows the revenues by source, so the wholesale fuels tax plus the state sales and use tax, as well as a separate item for the state sales and use tax for ATVs and mopeds, if we wanted to know that information. We also receive journal entries for when all the transactions take place during the month. So if we wanted to fine tune on any one particular deposit or action taken, we can look at the journal entries. And we also see the payment records year to date. That is all the monthly reporting that we get from the transportation fund itself, which is essentially our side. The revenues received is the transportation fund. Next page. On the investment side, so that's the second part of our monthly reporting, we have basically four different components of our regional account. The first is the local government investment pool, which as of, I believe this is July as well, 94.3 million. The Virginia investment pool, 97.7 million, and a certificate of deposit for 85.08 million, as well as a smaller amount that is set aside in cash, just over 6 million, for use to, and all this goes into continuing those investment strategies, as well as having the cash available for those projects, the regional projects that have begun by our member jurisdictions that we have standard project agreements for that are already in the reimbursement process. So these accounts and the cash itself is available for making those payments back out so that we make sure that all our bills are paid and everything is moving forward smoothly. Next slide. I have the appendix in this document shows you what all that paperwork looks like. But I think, Mr. Chair, you had some good advice to save everybody from that level of minutia. It is there if you have more desire to look at what the actual reports are. I'd be happy to provide any more detail that I can as we move forward in this process, but this is essentially a look behind the curtain in terms of what we see on a monthly basis.
Great. You know, just for context, the request was more of a, hey, how do we know that we're getting the monies that we are owed? What this should also shed some light on, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes to make sure that we are a well-managed organization. And I thought it was important for us all to see what all goes into this. I would encourage you to share this with your finance directors, as they may have thoughts and that goes on. So, Mr. Parsons, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
All right, now we're on to the next steps of the bond validation discussion.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I'm just going to do a brief introduction here, but we are now moving forward following the September authority action to enter into the bond validation process, which is a multi-month process to follow that provides essentially a safety check for the authority as it considers issuance of bonds over the next few years. I've asked Megan McGolan to join us from Kaufman Knowles to kind of talk us through what those next steps might be. It's a good starting point for the Finance Committee to understand what will be happening over the next few months. And there will be, I believe, some actions that are requested of you. Staff will be working closely with our council as well as Kaufman and Knowles to make sure that everything is moving forward. And Megan, thanks for being here. I'd be happy to turn it over to you to start talking through that.
Okay. As Mr. Parsons mentioned, the full authority signed off on us moving forward with the validation process. So just to keep the finance committee sort of up to date on what those next steps look like, and what you will be seeing from us when we come back as bond counsel with sort of the next formal action items, so no one is surprised and sort of understands what's happening behind the scenes. Over the next couple of months, we will be working with PFM, with Mr. Gregory and with CVTA staff on putting together the underlying validation papers that will be presented to the courts for the validation proceeding, and the various attachments that are presented to the court. The documents from that standpoint that this group was most concerned about would be the bond documents, which we presented to the court as part of the bond validation. So we will be working on those over the next couple of months, coming back to the committee with 2 action items and 2 formal resolutions. One, a formal resolution to move forward with the validation, giving bond and general counsel the authority to file the pleadings as well as to defend any legal challenges that might be presented in the validation. It gives us that formal authority to move forward on that regard. That would be presented in a short resolution for the committee to recommend for approval by the full authority. The second resolution is going to look a lot like a bond resolution for an approval of a bond issuance, but it is not the final approval. It is going to be an initial bond resolution that will approve the structure of the bonds. We've talked about at previous finance committee meetings, as well as the actual bond documents. So the next time you see me, I'm going to have a rather large stack of paper that you will have all gotten in advance with those bond documents for this group to consider and approve for recommendation to the full authority to consider and approve. I will point out that even at that point, it will look like the board and the committee is being asked to sign off on a formal bond issuance, but that is, like I said, the preview of what those bond documents look like. We need that step to be in place to have those documents to present in the validation proceedings. And as I think we've mentioned several times, we would be coming back to this board after a validation had been successfully done with that final approval for an actual bond issue, which I think we're talking about that in some time in the years to come. So we just didn't want folks to be surprised when they saw a lot of paper showing up the next time you see me, in case there were any questions or any concerns that folks had that they wanted to talk about in advance.
Great. Thank you so much, Megan. Any questions? Thoughts, concerns?
I have a question, Mr. Chair, just to
Mr. Gregory.
flesh things out a little bit for the committee.
You're still allowed to give answers.
No, well, the question, you never ask a question unless you know the answer. And I know the answer, but I want to sort of do an exposition of it, just so we all are clear on what's gonna happen next. And Ms. Gilliland was outstanding in her presentation, but so the first resolution is to authorize or to approve the what's called an indenture, right? And so what does the indenture provide?
So the first resolution is going to approve the bond documents. Those are the covenants that the CVTA is going to enter into with the future bond holders, where we make certain commitments on how much we're going to borrow, what our debt service coverage ratio is going to be. I believe you all have heard from Chrissy at PFM. She has talked about what your financial advisor is recommending for a debt service coverage ratio. It would walk through any reserve funds that the CVTA was covenanting to provide to bondholders. It would also include an additional bonds test. So after the first bond issue, if it was determined there were to be future subsequent bond issues, it would walk through what the rules of the road would be before CVTA would borrow additional debt. That is the sort of the main crux of the master trust indenture that we would be asking the committee to consider at that point.
Okay, and then the second step would actually authorize the bond validation process, which would be the litigation, if you will, in circuit court.
Correct.
For the court to say, give it ultimately a stamp of approval and say, yes, you can move forward with this, you have the statutory authority, you have the indenture, which is sound, and you're approved at that point.
Right, like we talked about in prior meetings, the intent of the validation is to ask the court to review the statutory authority for CVTA to issue debt, as well as to stamp its approval of the bond documents. So that would all be packaged up in the validation pleadings that we've presented to the court or filed with the court. So in order for us to initiate that validation, we need this board to consider and approve forms of those bond documents.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Any other questions or comments, discussion? All right, thank you very much for being here. All right, committee members, this is our time on our agenda for members to speak on anything they'd like to bring up to the finance committee about potentially going on in your jurisdictions or.
I got something.
All right,
I don't know if there is a SWVTA, Southwest Virginia Transportation Authority, but in dealing with reserves today, I'm sure they're going through a lot of their reserves right now. The destruction that's, I know personally, in Damascus, Virginia, I've seen the roads that aren't there anymore, they can't get to places. And a little side note that may be showing my hand, the one thing that has been able to deliver the adequate emergency aid in that has not been wind, solar, it has been natural gas and fossil fuel. So what I'm getting at here is we have a want to electrify the world. And right now, there is no electric out in those areas. If they need to get to their pharmacy, they can't charge their car if they only have an electric vehicle to get to their pharmacy. They're gonna be expecting somebody to deliver that to them. And, you know, in our future discussions, we need to look at what we're allowing to spend our money on. I know there's 15% goes to our bus system, and they want to electrify their whole thing, but they have a very good fleet of liquid propane vehicles. Why they wouldn't continue to do that, I wouldn't know. But that whole fleet would be down if there would be a problem like they had there. And that was 100, maybe 400-year storm. So could that happen here? Possibly. We know, we've seen some of the ramifications of the water just from that coming from the western part of the state on the James River. But just a little side note that reserves are good to have. And you know, it's something that we need to think about and be prepared for.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Moyer has actually sparked something else from this conversation, and that is we may actually be looking at our CTB member in the future to bring us information as how the roads that were destroyed in Southwest Virginia may affect funding. It may be that many of the transportation dollars that would be used for regional funding may end up having to be diverted to actually get some of those roads back in repair and fixed. And so I'd ask a CTB member that perhaps in the future, if you get any indication that this may in fact affect smart scale allocation and other funding, I think it would be important for us to have an idea about that, because that will affect what monies we may have available for any allocation in the future. And as Mr. Moyer said, this is a very unique storm that just devastated Southwest Virginia. And I mean, even looking, we've all looked at the videos, but I mean, there's sections of, and I don't know if it's in North Carolina or here, of I-40 that are completely washed out. That I think that's North Carolina, that's gonna take a year to rebuild. And we lost multiple bridges out in Southwest Virginia on some of these roads. So I think it's important for us to get an update on that in the future, because that may affect on how we're looking at future allocation of dollars. So I appreciate Mr. Moyer bringing that up.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll.
Good suggestion. I'll duly noted. I'll make note of anything I find out.
All right, anything else, committee members? All right, if not, I'll let the record show that we are adjourning the CVTA Finance Committee at 10:01, and we will see you all on November 13th.
If I don't see you, happy Halloween.